Hi, lonut.
Hi.
Hey. So I wanted to start with one of the questions that we had for Daniele and I didn't get a chance to address in the video. So I think the question from Alexander was, did you try to benchmark CashGround with their own Redis benchmarks and kind of see how they behave?
Absolutely. I do actually regularly test it on my hardware behind my back. I prefer to use Memtire benchmark instead of Redis benchmark because Redis benchmark is pretty limited in terms of capabilities of benchmarking. But absolutely, I keep doing benchmarks all the time.
Okay. And otherwise, just to kind of get this conversation going, I would propose let's make a roundtable and ask you about how important is performance in your respective companies. I mean, I think I know some of the answers to some of you, but I'm curious about the others. Is performance cool? Let me quote what I was asking. Is performance cool in your work group?
Absolutely. I mean, for me, it's my main focus. As you can have seen from my presentation, I tend to benchmark everything. I didn't include CashGround benchmarks simply because, as I mentioned earlier, I didn't hit the 0.1 version yet. But in general, before I merge any PR into my master branch, I always run benchmarks against the master version of CashGround and against Redis to see the actual differences in terms of performances. And actually, because today I got my third server, I will soon automate the benchmark for the PRs. So at least I will not have to run them manually. We are in 2021, so let's take advantage of automations.
That's really cool. What about you guys? Anybody else wants to chime in on how cool performance is in their group? Well, I think you're muted.
It was nice you guys turned the sirens on to remind me I'm muted. Thank you. I work for Facebook. We have a very large data center. And so 0.1% performance increase is very valuable. So I don't know if performance is cool, but it's certainly very essential and very important. I prefer essential and performant over cool, but then that, again, may have something to do with my natural hair color.
Thank you for that. What about you, Luca?
Yeah, I would say that my company, the performance is the core value of the company itself. So we are building software to improve and speed up services and application. So it's really important for us. And I would say that for me, it's a really cool performances. The problem is that most of the customer, I would say, that we work with, they see performance only after they had issue. So it's not something that is always upfront. A problem that you see and you prepare for is maybe have a huge disaster in production, and then I start to, okay, maybe it's better that I'm starting to think about performances, or maybe you have a competitor that is way faster than you, is becoming the market leader. So, but I guess that the awareness is somehow growing recently, so over the last year. So we are also a faster world. So performance is something that you have to deal with, and delivering fast and reliable services is becoming it was, but still growing, and will become a key factor for each and every player.
Okay. Yeah. I think you're right. It's usually a how do you call it? A backward-looking thing. Like, oh, I'm not doing well, so I better call in the performance experts. I know how it feels. What about you, Moritz?
Yeah, but basically completely agree with what the previous speakers said. So I think it's I think maybe like there are two aspects, right? The one is, like you're monitoring your fleet utilization, whatever, and in that case, of course, it's kind of your daily bread and butter, and you want to make sure that you're not consuming too much, don't run into performance issues. But then there's the user-facing side too, where usually it's not that cool, because you like things run fast enough, and that's okay. And then all of a sudden you hit a bottleneck, and performance all of a sudden becomes really uncool because now you got to do something about it, and then it becomes important.
Yeah, I've all been there. And what is the one thing you're looking forward, or let's say over the next 3 or 6 months? What thing you will do that you think will be particularly cool and want to share, or what do you think somebody else will do to make your life very easy in your own projects?
I will start. I will still be focused on CashGram, hopefully. I really hope that I will get the chance to spend more time on it, because working during the night/weekends, it's not the best. Sometimes you need to stop and recharge the batteries. So my hope is that down the line I will get more time to work on it. And I hope to have more hardware to perform benchmarks, because you can use the cloud, but you can't just use the cloud. And bare metal providers are slightly expensive, so that's the reason for which I'm building my own infrastructure. So I also hope to have more hardware in a few months.
All right. Who wants to go next?
So the thing that I'm probably going to do that will probably cause the most excitement, there's this thing called Rust. They would like to be in the Linux kernel. In fact, there is some Rust code in the Linux kernel. So the question is, where can it be used, and what are the limitations? Since I'm the primary maintainer of the Linux kernel memory model, a fair amount of that falls to me. And I suspect that there'll be some unhappiness with at least my initial pronouncement, and probably with the entire thing. But it is interesting taking a look at kind of a different philosophy of concurrency, and trying to see how it fits modern code.
Wow. One of the advantages of having your natural hair color.
Yeah, no, it's actually in a way really cool what Rust did. They essentially directly support in the language the notion that was very edgy yet sequent in the 1990s, which is locked data, not code. And so it has this concept of ownership. But it's from what I can see, and I'm not a Rust expert, maybe I'm missing something. Maybe you guys can tell me I'm full of it. I don't know. I mean, they'll tell me I'm full of it regardless, so that's fine. But that's as far as they go. And so there's a bunch of things that have been developed since 1990 that aren't natural fits. That doesn't mean they can't do it, okay? You can do very interesting things with a given approach, right? So they have locking. You can make fake locks. You can have locks that aren't really locks that designate something happening. And perhaps they can leverage that sort of thing to actually cover a fair amount of what we do in the Linux kernel. I suspect that there are some limitations, but my approach isn't to tell them they're full of it. I'm letting other people in this community do that. My approach instead is say, okay, if you want to take on this part of the Linux kernel, this is what you have to do. This is how tall you have to be to be on this ride, essentially, and let them decide where their ambitions lie and what they're willing to put up with to make it happen. Should be fun. Good, clean fun, as one of my managers used to say.
I like the emphasis on clean. Yeah. Thank you, Paul. What about you, Moritz? What are you looking forward in the next 3 to 6 months?
Yes, as you saw from my presentation, there was basically it stopped with, hey, we're rolling this out to cross-functional partners. So, and that like for various reasons with sort of ML tooling, because you might have an unnoticed data leak into your test set, basically offline and online experiments can be different. Ideally they shouldn't be, but you never know. So we're like really super excited to see how our approach is going to perform in practice.
And you, Luca, what are you guys going to talk about next in our next summit?
I would say the online optimization. So it's the same approach that I presented today. Is you perform optimization on workload that you repeat over and over. So it's a sort of test-based approach. The next step, the evolution of the reinforcement learning tuning is be able to do it live and online, collecting data and modifying parameters live, and be able to do it without the need of having a test environment, a benchmark, or a workload generation. So it's a completely different approach that allow to be more effective. There is, for sure, as you can imagine, risk. So it's a lot of attention on how to manage all the changes in production, this kind of aspect. But it's a I would say the natural evolution of the reinforcement learning based approach. So be able to use live data to improve the configuration of the system.
Oh, I agree that would be probably the holy grail. Optimize on the fly for workloads you don't really know. So that means that's the next level superpower right there. So we have a question from Alexandra. He was asking us, what do we think? What is your prediction, guys, for the Rust feature adoption? Is it popular in your companies?
In Microsoft, is being adopted, from what I know. But I think the biggest limitation of the new languages is, the ecosystem around them. It's the amount of libraries and support that you can, that you can find ready to use, take advantage of actually Rust. Rust as a language is great, and I hope it gets adopted everywhere, at least to replace C as much as possible, and maybe C++. But yeah, I totally think that in the future, Rust will be much, much more adopted.
Well, we know what Paul is going to say.
There, if I can find my mute button again and do something, I might say something. What I'm seeing, and this is not necessarily scientific, is that Rust is very popular for people that wrote something in a scripting language, maybe Python, maybe Perl, whatever, and suddenly this thing gets deployed across huge numbers of machines, and suddenly it's chewing down all sorts of energy, which on a single machine is no big deal, but if you have enough machines, you're talking serious issues. And so it's, if those are, especially when those are slightly concurrent, coding them in Rust appears to be a very good way to get much better energy efficiency, better performance, without too much pain. Okay. I mean, it's not a garbage collected language, so it doesn't have quite that patina, but it apparently, I haven't used it myself, all right, but from the people I talk to, it's a nice compromise between a garbage collected scripting language on the one hand and C-style performance on the other hand, if you don't have too high a concurrency level you need to provide. So there's your hearsay.
Exactly, and that's how we learn from others. Others hearsay through their own filter. Luca, what about you guys?
Yeah, it's not that popular in our company. I'm not, I would say, also so involved in the dev side of our product. So I'm not, I guess my background is slightly different from the other attendees. So I have no specific opinion on this topic, I would say. So.
No worries. And Moritz, on your guys with ML, is this something that comes up for us, or it's another totally different space?
I mean, it's language that we could support. I don't know what would speak against it. I guess we would have to, do pre-training on a sufficiently large code base, which I am not aware whether Facebook has that or not, to be honest. Other than that, I think from the program paradigm, right, it's sufficiently similar. It's like basically imperative, so I wouldn't know why it wouldn't work. Like, I guess like the more interesting thing is like, would something like Haskell work? Or probably I'd say since it's functional and we really kind of rely on the notion of function performance, that probably work even better.
Okay. All right. Let me check. Yeah, I think these are all the questions I had. Any questions you guys want to ask each other, or any closing statements before we part? No. All right. Then
just one question I have is that there's sometimes you have a language, and then you have the language plus this library, and then the language plus the tooling supporting that language, and all three. I'm just curious what your guys' opinions are of that, of splitting things out that way, especially Moritz with your Pascal and ML. That's I'm interested in your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. Actually, we kind of with lonut, I think we kind of touched up on that. Basically, I think what you need for an ML approach is to somehow have a, say, confined universe of different constructs. If somehow that space is not confined, you could also say that your training set is kind of too small. Then probably you'd have the issue that you would find in your test set kind of constructs, API calls, whatever it may be, libraries that your algorithm hasn't seen before, that you have a really hard time to actually meaningfully generalize from the train set to your test set. So if for whatever reason, there'd be things that you couldn't that you wouldn't see in your train set, then say a new library, for example, right? If you haven't seen the performance characteristics that library might have, and it's not kind of based on building blocks that you were able to learn from previously, then you would be down to sheer luck whether you couldn't make a good prediction on it.
So basically, it's how good your history is. If you have some unexpected change in the hardware, the software, the use cases, whatever, it's a surprise to the machine learning, just like it'd be a surprise to a human being. Is that fair, or am I missing something?
Exactly. Okay. That's exactly how I see it. And I think kind of in general, when you look at sort of, the problems that ML tries to solve, you see that over and over again. It's like self-driving cars. you get to some weird edge cases that you haven't seen before, and there are lots of that in the real world. And then all of a sudden it does things that it shouldn't do. So,
like run into police cars with their lights and siren on a couple days ago. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. Thank you for preparing the wonderful talks you've shared with us. And thank you to Alison and Annika for making this work seamlessly. And thank you to our audience for dialing in the morning or the evening and trying to learn more about the wonderful art, the cool art of performance optimization. Voilà. Thank you, everybody.